We're going to go ahead and give it 5 more minutes while people are funneling through that dessert line, okay? So please stand by. Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed lunch and got through that dessert line over there. I'm Steve Olszanowski from Axum Technologies, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Building Economies Theater. This session is going to focus on DOD mobility. Before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that at the end of Ms. Rice's presentation, there is a microphone in the center aisle. Just go ahead and line up behind that and ask your questions. That part of it, there is not a moderator, so please feel free to move close to the mic. That being said, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Kimberly Rice, DISA's Mobility Program Manager. Ms. Rice's biography can be found on the Symposium app. And so please join me in welcoming Ms. Rice.
Thank you. Oof. All right. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. Hopefully, so maybe Greg will give me the wave. Can you hear me? No, I didn't say can you see me. I said can you hear me? All right. So if you can't hear me, please raise a hand, and I'll try to talk a little bit louder since there's a little bit of stuff going on today. Welcome. I'm glad you guys took a few minutes to come and listen to the mobility spiel. Not to put a shameless plug out there, but to put a shameless plug out there, there's going to be another session that we were volunteered. Is going to be happening this afternoon that's going to be a little bit more interactive and actually will give me an opportunity to talk more to the industry partners and ask them lots of questions. So for anybody who's interested, that's going to be at 4:15 this afternoon. It's been identified as a networking session, so we'll see how that works out for FCA. All right? So let's go to the first slide. Presentation disclaimer. I am not committing on behalf of the United States government. That's all you need to know. Next chart, please. Okay, so what I wanted to do today was talk to you a little bit about mobility and talk to you about where the program's at, talk to you about where the program is going. And so it's always reassuring when you hear the big boss, so when you hear Mr. Halverson talk and some of the principles that he's talking about as being hard, so things like culture shift, being able to do things agile, being able to do things quickly. This is always reassuring for someone like me to hear from a mobility perspective because in my mind, mobility defines fast. It defines the ability to get capability to the warfighter quickly. So it's good to hear him talking about, at his level, some of the big challenges that we have, that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. For him to recognize that at the senior level is really great, and it does wonders for helping the program office move some of these enterprise services across the department. So I don't think it's going to come as any surprise to anyone. In terms of an objective state and where the program is at and where we're headed, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone in terms of the concept of any user, any device, anywhere, okay? I think pretty much everybody has heard me talk about that before in the past, and that's been the pipe dream for the department over the last several years as mobility and other data systems have really started to get into the hands of users in locations other than your desktop and your office location, okay? What I do want to talk to you about is, so while our end objective may have stayed the same, I think what we're seeing is changing is the way that we're going to get there and the type of things that have to happen in order for mobility to be successful. And a lot of this is lessons learned that we're gathering as we're going through the process of deploying our operational enterprise services and starting to hear back from users coming in with new requirements who are doing things with those devices at all domains that we never thought that they were going to do. And so a lot of that is driving how we are going to implement this objective as we go forward, because our original state for where we started and what we thought would be a good process and a good capability for deploying and a method for deploying, we have already come to the realization it's not going to work. Okay, if we go down the path that we had started out on, we're going to fail miserably because it's basically unsustainable. Okay, so I think some of the things that you all need to be aware of as we're re-looking at how we're going to evolve this capability to get to the objective state, some of the things that are driving the department and are going to be driving the program office are things that everyone across the DOD and federal government are going to be experiencing. Okay, so things like fiscal constraints. This is a track that's talking about economies. Okay, so why is that important to the objective state for mobility? Things like technical innovation, the adversaries' innovation and how quickly they're getting cyber threats and being able to do things with their mobile devices that we are not even thinking about yet. That's rapidly evolving. Things like who needs the services, okay? So we used to start out where a mobile device would be in a senior's hand, at the president's level, at the general officer's level. We're really talking about deploying the enterprise service now for every worker within the department and their ability to be able to do that work wherever they happen to be, and it's no longer a device that's given to someone based on their seniority. It's a way of life and a way of culture. Most of the young people that we have coming into our office, the fact that we don't issue them a mobile device, and not only do we not issue them a mobile device, but when we do give them a mobile device and tell them, hey, by the way, congratulations, you can use this for texting, email, and maybe one or two apps, they turn around and look at me like I'm crazy. What else am I going to be able to do with this phone? Well, nothing. You're going to have to come back to the office. So, our entire way of thinking has to change. So looking at the things that are impacting us and then looking at how we want to get there. So when we talk about our customer, when we started out 3 years ago, the customer set was pretty well defined. Okay, President on the secure side, EOP, NLCC type communications, the combatant commander, very senior folks. Services, military department heads, it was a very defined group. Okay, what we're finding today, and again, this is important for the objective state because we didn't think about this 3 years ago. We should have, but we didn't. The community of interest that have come in and looked at mobility and come in and asked DISA for support has expanded significantly. Okay, so in just the last 3 months, we've had the department, so the medical community has come in and said, hey, we got a problem, okay? We've got apps that are deploying. We have no strategy for managing our medical devices. We have no way of communicating. Help us, okay? We've got task forces coming in made up of folks across the government who are saying, if we can use your secret device, we are literally going to be taking weeks, days, and hours off of time that we used to spend getting access to a secure device. So the community of interest that we have building up is expanding. Another group that we've had come in, and we talked about this one a little bit before, the recruiters. The reason I'm pointing these out is each one of these groups has a different requirement that the system today cannot handle in an elegant, secure manner. Okay, so the program office today is basically taking all of these requirements and kludging them together and trying to provide some type of support to these customers who are coming in, and it's not sustainable as our numbers start to go up. Okay, so from the objective perspective, some of the things that we need to be looking at, and you'll notice up here, so the big focus areas for the program office are going to be, one, how do we get the baseline infrastructure in place that will be able to support capability? And when I say capability, I don't mean the standard email, calendar, texting concept, okay? I'm talking about how do I give the chairman an iPad, a Samsung device that is big enough to see all of the red force, blue force tracking moving in theater, and he can take that live to the president and show him this is what's moving in theater. Okay, not a snapshot of a PowerPoint chart, not a snapshot capture that was done 3 hours ago, but something that's actually moving in theater, okay? That's where we're heading to. We've got to give the basis within the infrastructure components to allow all of that capability to build up, okay? And we have to be able to do it smartly, we have to be able to do it economically, and we have to be able to also address the last big group that we haven't addressed yet is coalition, okay? So that's the environment that we're working in. From an objective state, we have to be able to be flexible enough to add those types of requirements in, support those types of users, and also take advantage of the type of technical innovation that we know is out there we haven't been able to take advantage of. Last big thing, so user experience. So from an objective state, we focus mostly on the devices. What we need to be focusing on is the user experience and things like it should not take my DMCC user 47 steps to get access to their device. Okay, it shouldn't take 50 steps to get an unclassified capability into their hands. So how do we start making this into the one-stop shopping, the ability to click and point, and also standardize some of the offerings that are coming out from DISA? That's all within the charter of the program office and what we're starting to build to from an objective state to get these building blocks into place. Okay, last but not least, so economy and what it means for the program office and DOD. So at this point, the enterprise services for mobility have got to expand. There's been a lot of discussion across the department on better buying, and that's one of the areas that when we start looking at how is mobility going to evolve, does it make sense for every service to have their own service offering? Does it make sense for every service, department, and agency within DOD to have their own contracts for devices, purchasing data plans, purchasing MDMs? The answer is no. Okay, so there's a lot of work from a process perspective where both process and targeting, how do we start consolidating that buying power down so that the department really has a position with the commercial entities that says, as one entity for DOD, we want to execute one contract to get data service plans, peripherals, single service management stuff, and we want to be able to leverage that and be able to be in a good negotiating space. Economies of scale, we know we have to get there. We also cannot afford, in the fiscal constrained environment that we're in, we can't afford to have multiple services that are purchasing their own thing, their own things, and then coming back and saying, oh, by the way, we've now opened the DOD up for that many more vulnerabilities because each user is carrying multiple devices, we have multiple services hitting against multiple networks. All of that kind of starts coming together where we say, okay, enough is enough, we really need to single this down into a single state. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so some of the specific challenges that we're looking at, and a lot of what I wanted to gear today in both this session and the next session is really to help position both from a customer perspective and also industry. This is our thought pattern and our thought process for where we think we're heading to as we put together our single service manager RFP that's targeted for this summer. This is what our problem set is, and this is where the requirements are coming from, because we are depending on industry partners to come back with the proposals that are going to meet our requirements. Okay, so we're trying to get as much of this information out as possible. So mobility challenges for the program office today and across the department. I would say that the number one challenge, and Mr. Halverson referred to it this morning, so I don't think it's the technology. Okay, my 8-year-old daughter frequently takes my phone, does things with it, and I have no idea what she did with it. And I have to go back to her and beg her to please undo whatever she did. Okay, so I don't think technology is the issue. The biggest challenge that we have right now, and we see it every day for mobility, is change. Okay, so change in culture is hard. When you look at from an objective state where mobility needs to go, there is not a single process that the program office is not flipping upside down that has to change if mobility is going to be successful. Okay, so engineering, business processes, how you order, how you manage, how you sustain, all of that has to be re-looked at in order to maintain itself in a mobile environment, okay? And also be able to get things out securely to the warfighter in something less than 18 months. So we know that mobile apps turn 2-3 weeks, okay, sometimes days. How does DOD take advantage of that without putting more risk onto its network? So in looking at change, some of the other things that we're looking at, so authentication. We have not been able to answer that well, okay? I know I'm going to get questions about purebred and derived credentials. Got it, okay? That's to address the immediate challenge, which is how do I get users with the ability to access websites and signed and encrypted emails, okay? What we should be looking at from an objective state is PKI and CAC is probably not where we should be going with for mobility, okay? How do we take advantage of biometrics? How do we take advantage of some of the new chips that are coming out? How do we get that into a device that we can hand out to a soldier and know that that's going to be much more secure than anything we've done to date, okay? And so part of the point here is it's not only a challenge for meeting the immediate need, it's also a challenge for taking enough resources and time to build that into our plan as we move forward, so that 5 years from now we're not having the same discussion where I say, okay, we have over-the-air credentials, however, we're now 3 years behind trying to get biometrics into place. Okay, so we need that help to try to figure out what are the stages that we need to be going through, all right? Cyber threat is growing. So for the department, especially for mobility, our biggest challenge is not the fact that there's a threat out there, it's the way that the department addresses it. So the way that the program office and the standard cyber review is, we look at static versus dynamic, okay? So we do a lot of due diligence to make sure that whatever is, as it's going into the field, we make sure that it's secure, okay? We don't spend any time looking at what happens, for example, in an app. What happens after that app's been out there for a certain period of time and whatever's been embedded in it comes awake? We don't have any tools out there that's doing that type of monitoring on a regular basis. We know that that's where the next threat is going to be. Okay, so that's a challenge that we need to start anticipating. So 2 other challenges, and again, I'm spending time on this because this is really what we have today and where we need to be focusing on the future, because we've got to get away from just being able to do email, all right? So 2 other big areas, legacy data. We have not figured out what that framework is going to look like. So the big legacy systems that are out there cannot afford to go mobile. They cannot afford to redesign what they've had out there for many years. So we got to think outside of the box and figure out how are we going to get access to that data on a mobile device without costing the entire department's budget, okay? We also have to figure out how do we make sure that it's readable on a mobile device and that it's manageable and, okay, novel thought, if you need to make changes to reports that are stored somewhere, how do you make that change, and then how do you make sure that you get the access to that report back again, okay? The other thing is, so access to documentation, access to artifacts. We haven't gotten there yet, okay? On any domain, we haven't gotten there yet. We need to make sure that we get there, and at the enterprise, this is important because that will be the driver for the rest of the department on how they're going to be able to manage the documents, manage the artifacts, manage the tracks, and be able at each domain to be able to use that data, but also from an authoritative data perspective, how do we know what the standards are that people can start using in order to store that data, and that it is the authoritative data, so we don't have people coming back in and saying, hey, I pulled weather from this source. Is that the source that we should all be using? Perhaps not something important that we think about day in, day out, but if you have somebody who's relying on that for targeting, making a decision on whether or not they're going to drop something, all of their information has to be from the authoritative source, and they have to have confidence in it. Okay? Next chart. Okay, so mobility-wide transformation, I really think that this is a department-level-wide transformation. This gets to the cultural changes in the way that we currently think. I don't think that we think in mobile yet. I don't think we've ever had that opportunity. So we have pockets of excellence where we've got, again, users coming in and asking the program office to do things like, hey, can you manage Fitbits for the Army? Okay, because we'd like to start transitioning from having paper readiness, paper met and metal data. We'd like to be able to pull that directly from Fitbits and be able to monitor that through an MDM. Can you do that? Okay, never thought about that. Let's start looking into it. Our DMCC, we got that out there. Secure comms, great response on that. First question back from CENTCOM was, hey, this is great, but I need to be able to see targeting information. Can I see the predator feed from that device while I'm in theater? Okay, that's a pretty important operational need. How are we going to get there? Okay, so what we need to be looking at, again, not going to read them, but some of the things that I want to highlight. We really want to get to the point where you're not carrying 4 or 5 devices around. Okay, so multi-layered security on a device, how are we going to do that? I have not yet seen anyone come in with an idea or an innovation that says this takes care of all the cross-domain issues, this takes care of all of the requirements for NSA. You can do any classification on this phone, okay? We've got to get there. Coalition is a huge, huge question. How are we going to do NATO sharing, coalition partner sharing, getting that data to people? Because that's the way that we're fighting wars, all right? We're not giving them capabilities that are allowing them to easily do that. They're coming up with workarounds, but again, that's got to be a part of the requirement set. When we started off 3 years ago, we didn't have coalition as a part of our requirements. We now have coalition as a part of our requirements because the environment dictates it, We don't have any way of doing that easily. So we've got to address that and build that in as we go forward. Last one that I want to highlight, so 2 common sense ones. Auditing, threat detection. Not doing a great job on it. I know there's a lot of tools out there. We got to figure out how to build that in. Last one is, so it would be really nice, as I'm carrying 5 devices around, that I be able to at least access my personal email, my personal calendar from that device, without getting the "you are now in non-compliance" warning every time I do that on my phone for work. So how do we start putting some of those personal things onto the phone that make common sense? Again, reducing the risk at the number of times people are hitting the network and the possibility for losing the device. So that's, from a transformation perspective, those are all the type of things that we need to start thinking about. And again, when we say thinking about it, we're looking at 12 to 18 months for getting a lot of this stuff moving forward and at least getting pieces of it delivered by the program office. We're not looking at the entire environment, entire ecosystem being delivered in 18 months. Next chart. Okay. So shift a little bit from talking about where we want to go objectively. So this is a picture of where we are today. So the program office stood up 3 years ago. We were successful in convincing our contracting folks to help us out and let us share on contracts that were already in existence, so we didn't have to use the regular contracting process. We were able to get a whole bunch of things put under contract. We executed our own MDM contract, and then we sat back and we started deploying it, and I looked at the program office and said, holy cow, okay, I got 18 contracts, 18 different PMs from the different contracts, a bunch of things coming into the government, and the government's doing the integration. There's no way the government should be continuing to do the integration. That is not our core competency. So we're looking at the environment today where we've got this mess of things. I can't sustain it. I cannot continue to manage that many contracts, that many different vendors coming in. And we went out to industry and we said, okay, what's the next best step? Industry responded and said, you need to be going to a services model. So that's basically where we're headed to, okay? We're in the process of working through, I know many of you have come through and asked what the status is of the RFP, still targeting this summer. RFI is out there, the requirement set, as much information as we get in from both the users and industry, that's rolling right back into the PWS as we're finalizing and getting that ready, okay? But the core concept is, again, not only get the government out of the middle of doing things we don't do well, like integration, but also looking at some of the other things that we haven't been doing at all that we're now being mandated to do. So if we can go to the next slide. So things like telephony management, as dictated by OMB and by our friends at GSA, everyone within the department is supposed to be reporting, just starting simple, how many devices, how many minutes, how much data are you using, okay? We're going to take it one step further because that's one of the other areas that we have a lot of management issues with in terms of where is the device. Okay, so we spend an inordinate amount of time tracking on spreadsheets. Who's got a device? Who's supposed to have it through the order? Where is it supposed to go next? We need to automate all of that. And this is a service that right now across the department is not available on a regular basis, and we need to get into the methods of, okay, if a carrier can do this, DOD should be able to do automated reporting and understand who's using the device, where was it last used, how many minutes, all that good stuff, okay? So that's going to be a major push within the single service manager. Again, a lot of the focus is going to be on not only the improvement of the capability and expanding so we can actually offer more of the capabilities that we should be from mobility, but it's also going to be focusing on how do we start getting some efficiencies and some economies. And again, so the concept here is not going to be, because we're working closely with a whole bunch of people to include the DOD CIO. We've had the discussion back and forth on whether the implementation of this should be mandated and put into policy. Our position right now is that I'm not going to mandate that anyone come and be forced to use a DISA enterprise service. The enterprise service should stand on its own, and that's what we're aiming for, is that the requirements that we've been unable to support from the services up until now because of the timelines and money and all that good stuff, it should be a service that they're going to want to come and use. So we've incorporated as many of the services requirements as we have been able to. A lot of it is going to depend on the quality that comes back out, okay? Last area, so This is an expansion from where we've been today. There's been a lot of discussion about help desk and management. We're going to have to figure out what that looks like, but we know that we can do a better job, especially in the VIP area. So how do we do tracking and monitoring? But how do we also do the reporting and making sure that the local sites and the local user have the type of permissions and accounting that they need without meaning that they have to have their own system to touch. So that's a lot of controls that we need to build in, and that requirement set is going to be fairly interesting as we go through this. All right, next slide. Okay, so economies of scale and industry innovation. We don't do a great job at this. And this is really where we have the plug and the plea for, as we're going out with the SSM, we really need help and we'll start with mobility. How do we take advantage of apps that are coming out there? How do we deal with paid apps? How do we, anybody who's gone to Disney recently, how do we start thinking about putting your CAT card or your credentials into a magic band, right? Can you put it on your mobile device and you scan it in? All those type of things are where we should be looking at from the mobile environment instead of just the core capabilities that we have today. So what are those cool technical innovations that we don't know about, and how do we wrap those in? That's where I think we're going to have the most return on investment in terms of being able to get those type of capabilities to the warfighter at the enterprise level. I think if we can get a couple of those out there, you're going to see a huge influx in the number of people who are using their mobile devices. So this is where we really, again, are asking for help. Biometrics keeps coming up. We also have, a lot of great industry partners who have come in with some of the innovations they have. We're really asking for help in terms of not only how do we use it, how do we know about it, but how do we get it deployed and making sure that it's not going to introduce new risks to the environment. Next chart. Okay, so capability-wise, next two charts just go through at a very high level to close this out for where we're at today. As many of you know, we've got capabilities across unclassified, secret, and you will laugh, we have one TSSCI pilot user out there. I know for those of you who have dealt on the SCI level, you all know that that is a huge accomplishment, getting that one user out there. So we're still working in that environment. So we've got capabilities out there. DMCC in particular has had an overwhelming response. That's one that we did not consider we would have as many coalition and other governmental folks asking for the service, and so that's been a nice surprise. We cannot keep up with the demand at this point, so some of what we're aiming for is to get another commercial device out there to help with that surge of requirements that have come in. Unclass, so the big news there, and I know some of you have probably already been to the DISA booth where we've got the purebred and drive credentials available for you to look at. The focus right now on the unclass side is really transitioning from the soft cert pilot and being able to get the over-the-air credentials onto all of the OSs that we support today and making sure that we get that out as quickly as possible. So that's targeted for the summer. We do have what we call as a soft cert pilot where we have, how many, Brandon, 500? About 500 users across the department and some other governmental folks who have been using it on a regular basis in a pilot mode, and we've gotten some great lessons learned and feedback from them as well. All right, next chart. Okay, next 6 to 12-month targets. So, again, focusing on doing derived credentials over the air, making sure that we get that deployed. That is going to be a phased approach. Yeah, see, this is kind of funny. It's mobility, and I got this whole side of the room taking pictures of the slides. It's kind of funny. So we're going to start off with iOS. It's going to be followed very quickly with Android and then Windows phones, and also with additional capabilities. So the initial capability is going to be focused on signed and encrypted email. We will go from there to being able to access CAC-enabled sites, websites, and then we're also going to be working on the other exciting one that we're working is, so it doesn't make much sense to have a mobility capability if you can't take it into all of the places that you need to work at. So we're also working across the department and starting a phased approach where we're going to be enabling DMUC devices. We'll have certain policies and locations where they should be able to take their device into, so not just your home location, but also say, for instance, you come to DISA headquarters as a visitor, you should be able to bring your DMUC device in, continue to do work on your iPad, Android phone, what have you, without having to leave your device parked in a car or parked in a lockbox when you get there. We're going to be pushing that across the department, so we're going to start with the Pentagon and a couple of remote locations, but starting to build in that if you have Wi-Fi capability at your site, we want your DMUC device to be able to take advantage of it. Okay, so that's the other big one we're working on unclassified. For secret, again, introducing a tablet, also introducing another device. We are also looking at getting our full MACP compliance package put together so it's easier to make changes to the infrastructure. And then we are back up and running in business with our current device. We were on a hold while we negotiated a contract. We've been able to get that awarded, so folks who want that device now, we've got quantity available. TS, so that is still on our plate. We are on hold with that for right now. The senior user that we gave the phone to was senior enough that we took great joy in when we were told, hey, cease and desist until we get the policies worked out, get a working group stood up and start working through that. We did ask very nicely if they wanted us to take that phone back from the senior user, and they decided that wasn't such a great idea. So we're still getting good data back on how that one user is executing. We have been told that we will most likely still continue with some type of a TS capability. We just don't know if it's going to be at the SCI or the collateral level. And that one's kind of an interesting one because that one is expanded, so we actually have requirements, folks, from not only DOD but some of the other entities across government coming in and saying, yes, we absolutely want to have an enterprise capability. We don't want to do this ourselves. And DISA, we want to be in on that planning. So kind of exciting that we've got that kind of synergy going on right now. Okay, last but not least, so just a snapshot of where we are user base. I'm really proud of the team and what they've managed to accomplish here. So the numbers on this chart are actually wrong. We are currently, next chart. So the numbers on this chart are actually wrong. Right now on the DMUC side, we have now hit over 40,000 users, which is pretty exciting when you consider a year ago, I think we were at about 7,000. Okay, so in a year, that's a pretty big expansion to the number of folks in the user base. And then on the DMCC side, we're now at over 1,500 users, and that number has expanded in the last 30 days. So we've had an increase of 500 in just the last 30 days, which is also very exciting. We gave a quick breakout of, so you can see the type of users. It's really across the department. So you have an idea of the type of scale and the sort of folks that we're supporting. Okay, that is all I had for the formal briefing. I'm happy to take some questions if there are any. I'm grateful I haven't put anybody to sleep yet. I don't see too many people nodding off. Any questions?
So when you have all three classification levels, is there a plan right now for the enterprise infrastructure to support one device with 3 different images on it, or are they completely isolated infrastructures for those devices? So if I need to carry an unclass, a class, and an SCI device, would that mean I'd have 3 mobile devices, or would I be able to carry just one and be presented with the different classification levels?
Okay, so it's hard to hear up here. I hope it's not as... So I think you're asking, is the future going to be for multiple devices, or are we trying to get down to the single device? So mobile nirvana is we want to get down to the single device, okay? Reality-wise, where I think we're going to head to in the next probably 3 years, I think you will still have to carry an unclassed device, but I think we will be able to get a multi-level security device where you can have for both TS and secret. I think that is probably easier to do than try to have a secret and an unclassed device in one. I'd say full device for just all 3, probably 5 years out. Any other questions? Yeah, Bob, I can't, even though you've got a booming voice, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. So as far as the objective goes, with relationship to the multiple independent layers of service on the device, do you see that going to one gateway with 3 separate classification or 2 separate classifications? or do you see that still the infrastructure still being segmented?
I don't know, Bob.
Understand?
What do you think? Seriously, what do you think? Because I'm not.
Well, so I
that's-
believe that designs could be provided that want two devices, or I should say two independent levels of security on a device, could come through one gateway to bring the gateway, sizes down, through two independent paths through that same gateway. So one would terminate at Zipper, one would terminate at JWIX, what have you. Whether the MACP will support that is another question.
So this is what I would tell you, okay? One of the reasons that we're going to the single service manager is because the program office is not the subject matter experts when it comes to the products that are out there and delivery of services, okay? So what I would tell you is I have a requirement that I need to support all three domains. I want to do it as high in performance as we can with as little disruption to the customers as possible, and it needs to be secure enough to meet MACP and CSFC compliance. Other than that, I don't want to have to tell you how to do it. You guys need to come back and tell me from an industry perspective, this is the commercial best practice, this is what we propose for meeting your requirement, and we get to evaluate that and say whether or not we think that's the best mode we can go with for the best price, or the government need to go back and relook at our writing because we didn't do a good enough job of describing what it is we think we need in place. Yes, sir.
What will happen to the purebred effort?
I'm sorry.
What will happen to the purebred effort?
What will happen to purebred when? With the SSM?
Well, does purebred morph into this thing that's going to happen this summer? Does it go away? Does it become a set of requirements? What exactly happens to that effort?
So that's a good question. So keep in mind two things. So purebred and derived credentials have two pieces. The first is the purebred capability is actually an enterprise capability that's being delivered by the PKI PMO. So they, as the enterprise providers for PKI authentication, they are the ones we have partnered with, and the PKI office is actually delivering that capability. So they will continue to offer that enterprise service until or if there is a better method of doing over-the-air credentials. From the Mobility Program Office perspective, what we are focused on is the mobile devices have to be enabled and the back-end infrastructure has to be enabled to work and interoperate with whatever solution the PKI office is providing at the enterprise. So we would expect to see in the single service manager a requirement that basically says that, right? You have to be able to access and interface with the enterprise solution for over-the-air credentials, and you have to be able to access whatever capability is CAC enabled. Make sure that your infrastructure for whatever integration needs to be done with those capabilities is completed so that you can access it.
So purebred is, as I understand it, currently uses SCEP enrollment protocol. Is that correct? SCEP enrollment is what purebred now uses. So is that going to be baked into the government's PKI? Just out of curiosity.
So right now it's a modified version within the purebred app. So today, the PKI PMO is developing apps for each platform. So however they implement it is within their app to their infrastructure. And so I would recommend talking to the PKI PMO on how you want to interface, how they build their app to work on your platform.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for attending. I appreciate it.